Hello and welcome to this virtual exhibition from the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology on the history of early China at the University of Northern Massachusetts. While it is not possible to host you here on our Lowell campus, I hope that this digital format will be just as engaging. My name is Linkai and I will be your digital curator for today. We will be going over several pieces from the collection which have been determined to be of immense archaeological importance and help explain civil society of the Xia dynasty in ancient China. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. Not all items from the collection will be presented in this virtual exhibition. Rather, simply items determined to be of cultural or historical significance by my work and other curators, and with much help from the items on exhibition from our partner curators in China. That being said, without further ado, here's a personal anecdote. So I grew up in China, studied there for many years, and have always been fascinated with the unique cultural artifacts which have come to dominate Chinese culture. But something which I've always not understood was how do we understand the society of the Xia dynasty, particularly when written or literary evidence is so scarce. Well, as it turns out, archaeology helps to fill in much of the gaps in our understanding of this story of China. The purpose of this exhibition will attempt to answer how can archaeological items affirm or discredit the validity of the traditional narrative of historical discourse. A good place to start is the Xiashangzhou chronology project, and while it is certainly controversial in its potential limitations, that we will discuss later. Nevertheless, the efficacy of the Xiashangzhou chronology project still helps to provide answers to our central question. We will begin by looking at some of the items on display here at the collection at the UNM. In particular, the Erlitou period, as they indicate the transition from pre-state to state societies in North China. The Erlitou state emerged during the 1900 to 1500 BC, and the archaeological site is generally divided into 4 phases, based on location and historical prominence. The Xiashangzhou chronology project concluded by classifying all 4 phases of the Erlitou culture into the Xia dynasty. Thus, we will follow that timeline accordingly. In general, there were 3 major categories of ritual objects in the early Bronze Age of China: jades, finely made pottery, and bronze vessels. Jades and high-quality ceramics were used as prestigious goods during the Neolithic period, while bronzes first appeared as small tools, weapons, and ornaments in the late Neolithic, mainly during the 3rd millennium BC, and then became ritual objects in the Erlitou Phase 3. In the first part of the tour, we will focus on the bronze objects, as the Erlitou culture is China's earliest recorded large-scale bronze industry, prompting our focus. We will go through several bronze pieces presented here at our collection, with respect to the phases, and examine their intricacies and significance in detail. The first phase of the Erlitou culture is at about 100 hectares, including artifacts of white pottery, ivory, turquoise, and bronze tools. The second phase, at about 300 hectares, is much more sophisticated and includes a palace as well as grave sites, with delicate bronzes, jades, lacquerwares, white pottery ornaments, proto-porcelain vessels, turquoise artifacts, and shell and crowry ornaments. One item unearthed of particular prominence was the Ling bronze bell, in which was most likely produced by a bronze casting foundry at the southeast of Phase 2, and later refined using bronze workshops in Phase 3. The significance of this piece exists primarily in its production technique and intricate style. They were most likely produced using a multi-piece mold technique, specifically for bronze ritual vessels, particularly using clay due to its size at about 9 centimeters tall. The Ling bell is narrow at the top and widens out towards the base. The surface of the object is of combined tile shape, with a single wing on one side and 2 holes at the top, with the center being a bridged-shaped knob. The entire surface remains undecorated with any ornaments. When excavated, the Ling bell was wrapped in several layers of textiles, and there was a jade clapper within the body of the bell. The bell's simple design is of quite important significance among early bronze works, as it is the earliest example in China of a bronze musical instrument with a clapper. Its combined tile shape derives from the elliptical shape of pottery bells from ancient central China. In addition, the bell also serves as the foundation for other musical instruments produced in the later Shang and Zhou dynasties. The bell itself also suggests a much more spectacular origin, for bronze production than seen in previous archaeological records. It is likely that bells were among the first Chinese bronze objects made, beginning at least by the 1600 BCE. This bronze bell was likely designed to be hung downwards. What is incredibly significant is that the uses of early bronze objects were not previously correlated with social hierarchy. However, the Arlito culture produced several high-status ritual pieces, including the bell, which was likely a symbol of prestige. Another example of a high-status ritual vessel is the Arlito jue. A jue is a small tripod pitcher with a pointed oval cross-section and a strap handle that interrupts the band of decoration. This particular bronze jue was found at Phase 3 of the Arlito site, and was certainly a drinking or ritual vessel, with particularly intricate construction and design. Smaller designs, such as the smaller units flanking the jue adjacent to the handle, likely were done by hand, as carving elements into the clay mold. The effect is bolder and more elegant, but the organization of the decor has not really changed. Archaeologists have determined 4 key ritual practices in the use of bronze vessels, such as the jue, which are, number 1, the use of sets on any occasion comprising a large range of different vessel types. Number 2, emphasizing the vessel shapes reflecting on the constructed character of Neolithic ceramics through several visually distinct parts. Number 3, prioritizing the use of wine containers. And number 4, in the burials of vessel and tombs. Overall, bronze items such as the Ling bell and jue provide direct and physical evidence of a late Neolithic society of the Arlito period in the same proposed location as the Xia dynasty. While the case of a lack of written accounts from anything substantial as of yet in the Arlito culture prompts questions of legitimacy of any dynastical rule, there is undoubtedly no question regarding the complexity of the first bronze industry at Arlito. That being said, it may be best to examine some other objects of historical relevance, which may help better dust off some uncertainty in the historical narrative, in particular, the use of jade and ceramics. Prior to the Arlito culture, jade artifacts had been found in main sites across mainland China, which comfortably encompassed the entirety of the Neolithic period. However, what is significant about jade in the Arlito culture is the notable incorporation of indigenous influences, along with Arlito culture, into the production of the jade objects found inside at Arlito Phase 3. While no direct evidence suggests that jade was ever produced on site, Arlito jade certainly has distinctive attributes. Largely, they're thin, flat, pointed, and sharp halberds. Presented here is a jade dagger axe known as a gu, made likely sometime in the 2000 to 1600 BCE. The use of jade objects is a sign of privilege, reserved to elite groups of high social status, as they were often found in elite burial sites. An analysis of the characteristics of the axe by expert archaeologists concluded that, quote, its more refined shape, new perforated hole for attachment, and slender proportions are outstanding characteristics that define later functional and symbolic bronze and jade yue, end quote. Furthermore, the opaque nephrite, mottled and striped in shades of gray and yellow-gray, are emblematic of the level of sophistication and craftsmanship needed to produce such an object. It is apparent that by about 3500 BCE, stone and jade tools begin to be consciously and consistently polished, and by circa 3300 BCE, tools and weapons begin to appear commonly as specialized objects. Our means of distinguishing utilitarian and defensive axes are therefore stylistic and formal. A thinner fabric, refinement through polish, and perforated hole for hafting qualify the axe as a weapon. Unlike jade, a clear symbol of what was produced at the Arlito culture were ceramics. There was a certain level of standardization that reflected the high quality of the ceramic production. The pottery tripod ewer, gui, shown here, is made of kaolinite clay, not only allowing for the modeling of its unique shape, but also is the same material used for making porcelain in the later historical periods. The gui vessel is the most recurrent form of white pottery, with the 4 phases of the Arlito culture exhibiting the most examples of white pottery. Ceramic vessels have been found in 2 contexts. Most were unearthed from elite burials at Arlito. Others were discovered in burials at regional centers. Among the phases, Arlito Phase 1 yielded the earliest examples of white gui vessels, leading to the precedent by which in every shape and form, the gui is a symbolic precursor to the bronze jue and jia appearing later on in the Arlito phases. In all regards, the jade and ceramics at Arlito provide a more general analysis of objects belonging to the Xia as dictated by the Xia Shangzhou chronology project. These different objects speak to the diverse uses of different materials and objects in a society, which certainly walked towards an affirmation of the historical narrative. In terms of the limitations of this exhibit, it seems that there is primary criticism regarding the reliance of the Xia Shangzhou chronology project, as the validity of the chronology had been called into question due to the lack of reliable written chronicles, and a over-reliance by pure means of archaeology and other sciences. And while such a case certainly limits the field of research, this exhibition, and many like it, attempt to look past such inadequacies and into the unique details of the archaeological and anthropological history of the Xia, as objects themselves often can tell better stories than written words alone. Therefore, we here at the Institute always try and will continue to maintain the most objective stance when it comes to international history. To conclude this tour, close examination of only some objects in the exhibition of the history of early China at the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology at the UNM helps support the validation of history purely based on archaeology. However, the real story of Xia is far more complicated and complex than one can imagine. And while certainly debate continues surrounding the dynastical nature of the Xia dynasty as well as the Arlito society, archaeology suggests a certain level of technological and societal sophistication in the culture which brings validation in the classification of a civilization of the traditional historical narrative to the forefront of the dynastical nature of the Xia. While documentation of further chronologies of the names of the Shang kings do involve written records of the oracle bones, it is precisely the absence of such records of the Xia which not only define the unique relationship archaeology and human history play in dictating our historical records, but also inspires and prompts the continued further research to search for the cultural remains and origins of the Xia people and the Xia dynasty. Ultimately, the final goal of countless researchers and archaeologists is to, quote, reconstruct the entire history of Xia based on archaeological data combined with the historical record, end quote. Doing so in a manner that is not only constructive, but also comprehensive, is indeed an immense but motivating challenge. Thank you for listening. This was produced in part by the UNM Digital Archive. If you would like to support more projects like these, please visit www.unm.edu.